Okay, so what have we got to do now? We've got to get tomorrow's work clothes out, so...
Which is this?
You can do that. You don't need me for that. The autism spectrum is a really strange one.
But I need you to make sure I do it right.
Now I can look back, Harrison being nearly 25. Perfect. And where do they go?
On the chair.
His brain is wired differently, so he has skills I could never imagine. OK, so what's on the bottom?
Trousers.
Yep. And on the next one up.
Shirt.
And next one up.
Underwear.
But there are lots of everyday things that he struggles with. Things like just his normal dressing, washing, and PJs for tonight, and I think we're done.
Is this a top or trousers?
Well, has it got a...
I think it's a top, but...
It's a top. As a parent of a child with disability or an adult with a disability, of course you wonder what's going to happen if you're not there.
How did the Premier League go last night?
Yeah, we beat Southampton 3-0. So we're level with Man City and Liverpool on points after they drew. That's terrific.
I suppose Tim's recent health issues have brought the whole idea of Harrison's independent living into a sharper focus.
OK, Harrison, I'll let you go.
Well, Tim has recently been diagnosed with leukaemia. That does, of course, create a whole new set of challenges.
2 normal Kias and 2 snitchels, no sausages. Yeah, no.
I'd seen a lot of elderly parents with adult children with disabilities, 50-year-olds and 60-year-olds living with 80-year-old parents. So I was very aware that was my future if I didn't do something very proactively.
It's all right. That is all for today.
And I didn't want it to be our future. I wanted Harrison to have his life, not our life.
Go. Thank you very much.
No worries, thank you.
It's always great to come here.
I have accelerated my bucket list for obvious reasons. I'm going to enjoy every day. And I hope Harrison will go on to enjoy the rest of his life.
New Nationals leader Tim Fischer has pledged to rebuild the party from the grassroots.
They're looking at each other. Happy.
Tim became leader of the National Party in 1990. We'd met in about 1984 and eventually became engaged in 1992.
Check. Oh, good, very good, Tim.
Tim was Deputy PM for about 3 years.
There we go.
He's a colourful character, and I think he was seen with great affection by the Australian people.
How long have you been in politics, Tim? Obviously not long enough. You haven't worked out how to be dirty.
Canberra was really a very complicated time in our lives. Harrison was born in 1993 and Dom in 96. Look, I think I knew from the very start that something about Harrison was different. We did bounce around different paediatricians and specialists for a long time till someone finally mentioned the word autism, probably 3 years later. We were told it will affect him for his whole life. He will probably never live independently. He will probably never have a job. He will probably never be able to do things that other children, adults do.
It was shattering. It was disappointing. It was challenging. And initially, I pushed back against it in a somewhat crazy way. But we loved him. He was our eldest son.
For me, it was a relief. I finally had a word. I didn't know what the word meant, but I finally had a word that I could sort of work with.
They had to give him a lot of attention because he really did need a lot of support to be able to get through pretty much anything in a public space without resulting in a tantrum or something like that.
Autism is a special type of person that is different to other people who have different skills and stuff, but is very socially secluded and stuff.
Harrison has been assessed at different parts of the spectrum all his life. Mostly it's been moderate, so somewhere in the middle.
I don't think I would be who I am without it, so everything is stuff that makes you unique. And for me, autism is one of the big things that makes me unique. That and probably being the biggest Pokemon fan in my age group.
And this, of course, is the auction for the Tim Fischer Akubra.
Having seen the reports on Harrison, I think there was an element of my realising that I was on the spectrum.
7,000.
We've got 7,000.
I never obtained an official diagnosis or anything, but I have certain methodologies to handle scheduling and other factors in a way which might be described as a degree of autism or being on the spectrum, certainly.
The all-time record price ever sold Akubra anywhere on the planet Earth. Good luck.
Tim can reel off train timetables and aeroplane schedules and even bus departure times from all around the world.
And a gearbox. There's actually a gearbox.
That's part of his quirkiness. An extraordinary memory and head for numbers that sometimes comes with a mild place on the spectrum.
Diesel with about a 1 foot wide piston, maybe a bit more, half a metre.
In fact, I can remember the moment it just hit me, and it was reading the book by Tony Attwood, Asperger's Syndrome, and realised it was actually about Tim, not about Harrison.
I am Tim Fischer, Federal Leader of the National Party, riding your tram to stop number 41.
That actually helped me a lot in understanding that he thought differently too. It wasn't just Harrison who thought differently, Tim did as well. Slowly it started to make sense of why he'd always felt a little bit of an outsider, but I think it gives him some comfort to, you know, be now part of an autistic tribe.
Tim had a travel schedule that was hectic, not simply because he was the head of a rurally based party and had to travel Australia.
Hey, Gabby.
But as Trade Minister, he was all over the world.
The main focus of the visit is doing business between Australia and Vietnam.
And I just suddenly thought one day I'm going to arrive back in a box on a jumbo. It was grinding away and gnawing at me.
Mr. Speaker, I announce that as a consequence of the convergence of certain political factors and certain personal factors, I've decided to step down as Federal Leader of the National Party.
From a personal point of view, I was not surprised at the time. And I knew that he had been in public life for a very long time indeed. And he was tired of it. He'd had enough. He felt he'd done what he could.
You are one of the very genuinely loved people in this place. You're going to be very much missed by us.
People often ask, was Harrison's autism the factor that made Tim leave politics? And I think I can say no, it wasn't.
You've been colouring.
I think it was literally parenthood.
It's the highest point in the world.
We just needed to be a family again.
Pick the ball up. And a little pass. Well done. Go again.
School for Harrison was always quite a challenge. We moved to maybe like 5 different schools when we were younger. Harrison was bullied probably throughout. The first thing you'll notice with Harrison is you have to call him Harrison. You can't shorten his name in any way.
They call me Harry mostly, which really hurt my feelings and made me very angry. Found it abusive and stuff.
And it is that thing that kids will do and realise that that gets a reaction.
So the anxiety would mean that he became very agitated. He would often run away in the early years. Autistic people, when they're in an environment that is not supportive of autistic people, become anxious. And the most obvious thing is when you're anxious, you can't learn.
He devised ways of handling his circumstance. He was not going to be the leader of the peer group in the playground. kicking a soccer ball. But he was going to have a lot of friends in the library. And it was Harrison finding a place in which he could kick his own goals.
After leaving school, it was a really tough time for Harrison. I knew he wanted to work. I knew he wanted to advance himself. We registered with 3 different disability employment agencies, and he was assessed as being, in his current state, unemployable. So we were very frustrated. I was, in fact, very angry. We knew that he had so much to offer, he just had to find the right workplace. And then a bizarre thing happened. One Sunday morning, I convinced Harrison to come with me to a function at his old school, and we had this chance meeting with the principal. She asked then, what was Harrison doing? And I said, absolutely nothing.
And it just blurted out of my mouth. I immediately said, well, I have work for him here. My IT department is in desperate need, and bring Harrison along.
That was Sunday. I said, we'll be there on Monday morning at 9 o'clock, and we were.
Morning, Harrison.
Good morning.
How are you?
Great.
Welcome for another day.
Thank you. But I thought it was a great opportunity. I knew the people there, and that's often difficult with the first job.
Harrison, there's a list there for you to do if you'd like to get...
I felt like it was a good step towards independence and stuff. I just turned 20 the day before, actually.
Harrison, I can't get into my laptop.
I'll see what I can do.
Yeah, I can't remember the password.
At first, Harrison required certainly high levels of support, and that slowly, day by day, changed. And obviously, he's fully independent in his work life now.
Should you write in your password? I enjoy being able to help out kids, and I love computing, so it's great to do that as part of my job. Let's check it worked.
Okay. The kids really like him having around because he helps out, and that's kind of what St. Monica's is all about. I really need a
133 then, he's not 134.
Harrison's been at St. Monica's for 5 years now.
Count up, 126, 127.
We embrace autism. We certainly don't see it as a disability. We see it as an ability and a different perspective that's just as valued.
Yeah, that's probably the closest that I can get.
It is solvable. Does anyone else want to try?
Yeah.
There have been many times, including that first day, that I have not been able to drive away from Harrison's work for the tears. It's the most amazing dream come true for me and for Tim. This is what we always hoped for him, but we weren't sure how we could get it.
There's a way to think about it. 25 by 6 is 150.
Harrison is paying his way in the community. He's doing his job. He's getting a modest pay. He gets to pay income tax and superannuation. They were giant stepping stones that you could not have possibly imagined 20 years ago or even 10 years ago.
Let's go, come on.
10.
15.
Gran gets 2. When I got older, I wanted a lot more independence and being able to do things myself.
He was just living at home on the farm. We were an hour out of town, there was no public transport, and that led me to thinking about independent living. So many things happened by chance, and it was a chance that I drove past a housing development being built and stopped and had a look around, and I thought, oh, that maybe is what we're looking for. And ran slap bang into Brendan Collins, who was the developer.
Well, she came in the office and first thing she did was cry. So she just cried because they were wondering about what Harrison's future can be if they weren't around. Where could Harrison be? I was aware that there was a whole group that weren't being catered for. So as people have had any special needs or they were older people, they weren't being catered for with the normal run-of-the-mill how subdivisions are done. When do you think you're for it?
Tomorrow morning.
Tomorrow morning, good. Yep. I wanted to build a development where people could live in somewhere that was different and it was a place that they would feel that they belong.
Brendan showed me into a couple of units and I just felt straight away, I can see him here. These are nice people. These are people that would look out for him.
It didn't take him long to start to be comfortable. And once his network started to expand, like I could see a huge change in his confidence. Quite incredible. You just do what you need to do.
So this is because I don't have much downtime, mate.
I think people love him in there.
At first, I stayed in with him most nights, and then I would start to have one night away, and that became 2 nights away, and that became 3 nights away, and now it's pretty much 7 nights away.
And this is his home, not the farm, not his bedroom at the farm. This is his home, and it's a damn good one, I have to say. A lot of space.
Time to eat.
He even allows us to stay, but only if we ask first.
Righto, guys. Sitting up properly, please.
When is your iPad top?
I need you to be respectful of Harrison. He's got a really amazing story, guys, and you will learn a lot from it. All right, take it away, Harrison.
Now, a few years ago, not long after I started working here, I went to a doctor who said I needed an MRI, which I was nervous about. And they came back saying I had this thing called a brain tumour in my brain.
Just as we thought everything was sort of coming together, out of the blue, we got the news that he had serious brain tumours, nothing to do with his autism.
It was really, really difficult. At a stage, I didn't think I'd even still be alive and stuff. It was very nerve-wracking.
It just did seem very unfair to him because he's had all these challenges throughout his life. If they didn't operate pretty much immediately, he only had a few months or 3 months or so.
Sadly, I think, and wrongly, I began to shut down on the matter because it was so upsetting. But he took it as well as you possibly could.
I had 3 tumours removed, 2 separate operations. I spent several nights in hospital, including a 3rd trip when I had a bleed in my head.
What was your biggest worry?
That I would die.
Did they tell you that could happen?
Yes.
We absolutely made sure that Harrison knew that his job was waiting for him. There was cards being made by the students and the staff. There was care packages being sent to him.
Dreams are all gone now and I'm feeling a lot better. And I'm really happy to be back here, really enjoying my job.
When you went for your surgery, were you asleep so then you couldn't
Yeah, I was asleep when they did it. I do enjoy helping the kids with autism especially, as they're people I understand better. You know, try and calm them down and stuff.
You're on your awesome lanyard you've got there, your lovely fabric. Why do you like that fabric?
Don't know why I like the fabric, but I use it to de-stress the fiddler because I often need something to fiddle with just to stay calm.
Harrison's definitely a role model. He shows the kids that there is no limitations on what a person is able to do.
You're really good at this.
Yeah. Pretty evenly matched at the moment.
I have no doubt Harrison has changed the culture of his workplace and of that school.
So if I move a piece over there, will you take it?
Probably.
I think one of the things that's most emotional for me is to realise that he was the one on the receiving end of the care for so long, and now he's the one giving the care.
Yeah, that was a good move. I would be happy to be seen as a bit of a role model. I'm proudly autistic, definitely. proud to have autism, I'm proud to be who I am, and I don't have any regrets about that. Still threatening my queen.
Let's start. What are we got to do before I head home?
2 dinners, make a lunch, make a breakfast, and make sure we've got our sausages for another breakfast.
Okay, we've got some. How many will you have?
2 dinners worth of 4.
So can you carry these over?
I think 4.
Harrison does need help in doing everyday tasks, but from what was him needing help 24 hours a day, he now needs only a tiny bit of help to get himself off to work. How do you want them?
What do you suggest?
You want them boiled? Skins on, skins off?
I'm confused. You're just getting confused.
Too many questions, I know. That's all good. I think we'll just cut them this way.
Yeah.
He still has anxiety. He's very rigid. He still eats the same thing every day, has his routines.
Yeah.
Do you think it's time we got a new drinker?
No.
Sure?
I'm sure.
How many years?
I don't know.
I reckon it's probably getting for its decade. One of the great things about independent living for Harrison has been that he has more control of his own environment. Great.
Friday, swimming.
And that reduces the anxiety, the noise, the people, the unexpected things.
And Saturday we go to Melbourne.
And Saturday we go to Melbourne to see Dad. Yay.
At the start of last year, 2017, Dad became very sick and he was diagnosed with a form of leukemia.
Myeloid acute leukemia, and that's proving a very tough battle. But Harrison is now so much better placed than even 4 years ago.
I struggle to think about what he says with that because it's a bit sad.
What's a bit sad?
The Dad's not well and he could die any day, probably.
A patient at the Australian Field Hospital at Wong Tower is Second Lieutenant Tim Fischer. He comes from Boori Creek via Wagga.
Hello, folks. Surprise. This opportunity to wish you a happy Christmas.
I thank Uncle Sam in Vietnam for 4 cancers: prostate cancer, a bladder cancer, and then a couple of melanomas. I had operations in 1st Battalion Royal Australian Regiment. Agent Orange was widely used. At least one specialist has suggested my immunity broke down a lot more quickly as a direct consequence.
Most people, certainly the doctors treating him, believe that's a very plausible link. And this particular cancer he has now is one of those that is usually through chemical exposure.
It does seem like a cruel price to pay for serving a country.
Yes, that's true.
Tim's always been a man of huge energy. I haven't noticed a lot of slowing down, and neither of his friends. I suspect neither of his family.
Good morning. Where are you off to? Canberra, briefly, for the Gun Safety Alliance launch. I don't often get back to Parliament House, so this will be a nice bipartisan occasion.
It's very hard for Tim to slow down and give the time to fighting his cancer and the current health condition that he has. He likes to just keep going and going and going till he drops. So another train, another day, and more transport, probably a bus, another plane at the other end, I think for a 1-hour meeting somewhere in between. But that's the way it's been, and that's the way Tim likes it.
It's as it is at 3 score plus 12. You take the cards you're dealt with and hope and pray.
What's the prognosis now?
It's not so good, and I accept that.
Will the Prime Minister help Australian women plan for a secure and independent financial future?
That's a good question.
Yeah.
It's a funny thing in our family that all of us are very interested in politics.
Do you agree with what he wants?
Short and yes.
Harrison at some point declared he was a Labor man.
Yeah, but you've had 5 years to change it, to make it better, and you haven't.
I partly think it was a rebellious trait in him, kind of anti-dad kind of views. And now what started as a maybe even just to be funny, it's definitely not that anymore. It is very intense.
Here you are, here's your friend.
Rand, I've never liked him since he voted for Rudd. Julia Gillard is my political idol. She was what got me into it, and is easily my favourite Prime Minister. Don't get me started on the other one, Bob Catter.
Oh, no, I won't start you on Bob Catter. But I think that's one person that we agree on.
Tim's come to terms with it now. I was actually very excited about it. I thought that really shows his own mind, and Tim took a bit longer.
Adjustments aren't fair, is what Labor's saying.
I just delighted he takes an interest in politics, and maybe one day he will switch back. Who knows?
Alrighty, ladies and gents, take a seat. Take a seat, everyone, and we'll get these fish and chips on the table. Awesome.
When I look at where he is now, in 2018, I am absolutely astounded how far he's come.
Help yourself.
I can't put into words how incredible it feels to see him valued by society, having a job, having friends.
Dear God, thanks for gathering us together on this lovely evening. We pray we all have a great meal, great company, and great weekend.
Amen. Amen. Amen.
I'm just so happy that Harrison has reached a degree of tranquility and positive approach to his life.
I hope it gets better, but it's hard.
But I will eventually leave, sooner or later, this planet Earth in the knowledge that Harrison is now far better placed than he was 10 years ago or 20 years ago.
It's a running joke.
So there's enormous relief that if something happened to me, if something happened to Tim, that there would be other people in his life other than his brother and his other extended family that would look out for him.
Who's playing Richmond tonight, Harrison? Hollywood.
Thanks to a lot of people, he now has his job, he has a life, he has friends, he has things to do every day, and he's a very happy man.
Cheers to all the good people. All the lovely people.
Cheers, Joe. Cheers, Dad.